So many years ago, in a previous life, I looked after an Egyptian monk. Not any monk, but a senior cleric who was in the running to become the next Coptic pope. And Father Raphael had developed a hydatid cyst. He'd eaten parasitic lamb, and the cyst had grown in his liver, and he had to come to Mass General to have it removed. Well, it's big surgery to remove the liver cyst and then to treat them with anti-parasite medication. So he lived with me for about 6 months. And he was a very good guest. He didn't speak much English, but the moment he felt a bit better, he'd help around the house. He'd dust and he'd do the dishes. And people would come to meet this very famous monk. They'd come like on pilgrimages, and they'd come with offerings and ready to bow down, and he'd be doing my dusting. And they were horrified. I think they thought I was like the most wicked person on earth. But he loved it. He loved being treated as a normal person, and he loved feeling that he was helping me. He wasn't just living there for 6 months. And Father Raphael, and he didn't get to be Pope, he didn't get the job, but he's still a senior monk, and we still keep in touch. So clearly I won a friend by letting him help with the housework. But you know, as I read this story, I don't see Elisha as someone who did dusting or dishes, do you? He had far too much awareness of his grandeur, of his importance. You know, he didn't even speak to the woman. He had his servant speak to her. Did you notice that? But the hero of our story, who doesn't have a name, recognized that Elisha was a man of God. And if she helped out a holy man, then she would grow closer to God. So she opened up her home and her heart to somebody who didn't even speak to her. Now, the Hebrew Bible identifies the woman from Shunem as a great woman. That's what it says in our Bibles. No name is provided, but she's designated as Isha Gedola, a great woman. And the English Bibles translate that as a wealthy woman. And she probably was, because she did a loft conversion in her house, and she didn't have to get a homeowner's loan, and she didn't have to get things fallen off the back of a truck. She just did that. So clearly money was not a problem for her. But I don't think great should be translated as wealthy, because I think she had far more greatness than her bank balance. So what else was this woman great in and great about?
Great in her faith.
Great in her faith. Yeah, exactly. Great in her faith, great in her service to God, yes. What else? Linda?
Well, she certainly had the gift of hospitality.
Yes, yeah, the gift of hospitality, thank you. And in the ancient Middle East, faith and hospitality were the two most cherished attributes. So morally and religiously speaking, this woman was a millionaire. She was a gazillionaire because she had a great gift of faith and she had a great gift of hospitality.
It sounds like she was also humble.
Sorry?
Humble.
And humble, yes. Yes, that's right, thank you. And very humble, yeah. I would have a hard time if Father Raphael had lived with me for 6 months and hadn't spoken to me. I'd only spoken to my husband, that would not have gone down well with me. So she was very humble. And Elisha, like Jesus, was always on the road. He went to help people, he went to warn people, watch out, there'll be drought, and he went to preach. And she noticed him out and about, and she started to invite him in for a meal, sort of like Mary and Martha. You know, they had Jesus stop by for a meal. She had Elisha stop by for a meal regularly, and he never spoke to her. I would really say, you know, Elisha, mate, I'm the one cooking the dinner here. But then, after a while, she suggested to her husband that they build him a room. They create a little room on top of the roof, and they furnished it, I hope you listened when Mary read it, with a bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp. This was luxury living. This was 3,000 years ago, and she's furnishing her like his own, studio apartment in downtown Boston. It's like, wow. And what's extraordinary, something very extraordinary happens in that little story about how she's arranging the room for him. She makes the decisions. Women were not allowed to leave the house.
And they have the habit of giving.
And they had to ask their husband. And she says, oh, by the way, I've decided we're going to let him stay here. This was a fierce woman. This was an independent woman. I love her. She's like my favorite. Sorry, Thomas. Sorry. I mean, she's a woman after my heart. Elisha never spoke to her. He only communicated through his servant. Did he like her? Did he like the woman?
I'm wondering, was it like respect, like he didn't feel that he should speak to a woman?
Oh, okay.
Those days?
Yes.
Man.
Yeah.
I think that was a typical behavior of Elisha.
Yeah.
Yes, if you remember when Naaman went there.
Yeah.
He didn't,
Oh, we didn't speak to him. Thank you. I was like, he didn't speak when Naaman went, and he was a captain of the guard, and he didn't speak to him either.
And secondly, being a man of God, you're not supposed to be too close to a woman.
Yeah, that's so. Thank you. So yes.
He couldn't speak the language well.
Yes. So that's right. So yeah, he was a man of God, and he had to be modest. And then Thomas is right. This was how he behaved. He didn't speak to Naaman, who was a man and a captain of the guard. I think he liked her. I think he really had a huge soft spot for this woman. He watched her. And he says to the servant, ask her if there's something I can do for her. Can I speak to the king? Can I speak to the commander? Can I speak to the mayor? Can I put a word in for you? What was Elisha offering? Could have been water rights, or less taxes, or protection. One of the commentaries I read said maybe he ran a protection racket on the side. Don't mess with Elisha's people.
Yeah, because the army, he talks about.
Yeah, the commander of the army, don't mess with this woman, she's one of mine. And she says, no thanks, I'm good. So this is like the Pope saying, do you want me to put a good word in for you? And he's, no, I'm good, thank you. My family can provide anything I need. Isn't she an amazing woman? I love this woman. She was doing this out of kindness. And I think also she was a woman of great faith. You don't do stuff for God to get stuff back from God. You don't say, well, God, I'm going to, be nice to you. But in the meantime, I want this or that or the other. Goodness is its own reward, and God is her own reward. So there was this relationship between Elisha and his Airbnb host in Shunem. And I think he liked her a lot. And, it bothers him that he hasn't done anything for her. So you have to think about this, really. So then he says to the servant, I think she should have a son. He doesn't speak to the woman. He doesn't speak to her husband. He says to his servant, I think she needs a son. I mean, this was a vet. Can you imagine in probate court? Can you imagine if she sued him for maintenance? And Elisha says, oh yes, I arranged for the son, but God did it. And she actually says, I'm not sure about this. Hope you're not messing with me. And Elisha was a man who was known to have a dark side. Remember the she-bears? Remember that? Some kids tease him for being a bully, some kids tease him for being bald. And so he thinks they're bullying him. So he summons a mother bear to kill them. Yeah. So Elisha has this dark side that probably everybody knew about, and the lady says to Elisha, don't mess with me now. Don't say one thing and then promise another, and don't do this. Don't mess with me. But in Elisha's day, in the ancient world, a son was always a gift of God. And so whether she wanted the boy or not, she clearly loves the boy and is devoted to the boy. And one day he goes out into the field and he gets this terrible headache, and commentaries suggest it was probably dehydration or sunstroke. And they rush and bring him in, and she holds him on her lap, and he dies. And some of the commentaries I read said, well, that proves she wasn't taking care of him. Do you believe it? I mean, 3,000 years later, they're still trashing the woman. Isn't that terrible? And I don't know whether he had sunstroke or dehydration or a little mini stroke or something, or a strep throat. I don't know what he had. But they rush and they bring her in, and she holds him on her lap. There was so little she could do. I'm sure she bathed his head and tried to get some water into him, but he died. He died in her lap. And then she picked him up and she laid him down on Elisha's bed. Now, why did she do that? Why did she put him on Elisha's bed? In the ancient world, it was believed that holy men made everything they touched holy. Like, remember Paul? When Paul was on mission trips, they would ask for his handkerchiefs. Or they'd touch his clothes because they believed that holiness spread to what you touched. So she puts her poor dead boy on Elisha's bed, and then she goes out after him. She gets on a donkey and she goes to get Elisha, and he sees her coming. And what does he do when he sees her coming?
Tells the servant.
He sends the servant, yes. He sends the servant. He can see she's upset. You'd think he'd run and say, oh my goodness, are you okay? He sends the servant. Are you okay? Is your husband okay? Is the kid okay? And what does she say? She says, we are well.
Oh, yeah.
He left to be well, why there's trouble?
Yes, we are well. Yes, this is hope speaking. This is faith speaking. She doesn't say, oh, fine, that my son's taking a rest. She says, we are well, because faith tells her that God is good and that God's goodness will prevail. So she says, we are well. And so Elisha says to the servant, go and fix it. You've got to love this man, right? Go and fix it. The son's dead. The son that you gave him is dead. And she rushes up to Elisha, the man who never speaks to her, and she hangs onto his feet, and she gets in his face, and she says, no. You gave me this son. I am not leaving without you. She's right there in his face, hanging onto his feet, touching him, all that modesty between men and women. She's hanging onto his feet. And in his face, she's saying, I am not leaving here without you. And so he goes. And he goes with her, and he finds the boy on his bed, in his room. And through a combination of prayer and some sort of primitive CPR, he brings the child back to life. And then that's sort of, you think, the end of the story. But because Elisha really does like this woman, he knows that famine is coming. And he says, you need to leave. We're going to have a terrible time here. You need to get out. Go away. And she goes away, her and her family and her household go to the Philistine country for 7 years. So Elisha actually saves the whole family and the whole household. And then at the end of the famine, they come back. They've lost their property. It's gone. It's been given to somebody else. And she goes to the king. She wants her property back. There is no reason on earth why the king had to give her his property back. You know, if the mayor takes your house, Jane, there's nothing that means she has to give it back to you, because that's her right as mayor. And the king had even more right to say to this woman, I don't care about your property. It's mine now. But he hears from this servant again that Elisha had helped her have a son and had healed her son when he died. And he's like, oh, wow. This woman is Elisha's favorite. Better not mess with her. he not only gives her property back, he says the whole 7 years where you lost income, you get that too. I mean, that is quite a turn up, right? You get the property back and you get the 7 years lost revenues. So greening, back to autumn, greening, we might think that turning to God, becoming closer to God, means becoming quieter, gentler, more mealy-mouthed. But it doesn't necessarily mean that. It can mean standing up for what is right, standing up for what is good. This woman's hospitality and generosity swayed a prophet. It swayed a king. And her inner strength helped her to serve God and helped her to claim what was rightly hers. So in the end, goodness and godness make you a stronger person and help you to serve God while serving the cause of goodness and right. And according to Elisha and the king, it's really attractive too, right?